He had everything a man could buy: a penthouse that overlooked Central Park, a private jet with his initials stitched into leather seats, a wine collection worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. But that Tuesday evening, standing in the doorway of his son's bedroom, Marcus Holloway felt something he hadn't felt in years. Something close to shame. His son, 7-year-old Noah, sat cross-legged on the floor, rocking back and forth, tears streaming down his face. And kneeling beside him, speaking in a voice so soft it was almost a whisper, was Eleanor, the woman he'd hired 3 months ago to clean his home. She wasn't trying to fix Noah. She was just there, present, patient. And for reasons Marcus couldn't name, watching her made his chest tighten in a way no board meeting or billion-dollar deal ever had. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Marcus Holloway was 42 years old when this story begins. He'd built his fortune in private equity, buying struggling companies, stripping them down, and selling them for profit. It was clean, legal, ruthless. He wore tailored suits from Milan, drove a matte black Range Rover, and lived in a world where silence meant success. His ex-wife, Vanessa, had left him 2 years earlier, taking half his assets and leaving him with joint custody of Noah. She'd called him emotionally unavailable. Cold, a man who measured everything except what mattered. He'd signed the divorce papers without argument. It was easier that way, easier than admitting she might be right. Noah had been diagnosed with autism when he was 4. Marcus loved his son, he told himself that often, but he didn't know how to reach him. So he hired people, therapists, specialists, tutors, and when none of them seemed to make Noah smile, Marcus did what he always did. He worked harder, made more money, built more distance. Elena Rodriguez was 38. She'd emigrated from the Dominican Republic 12 years ago with her daughter, sent money home every month, and worked 3 jobs before landing steady hours with a housekeeping agency. She didn't speak much, didn't ask questions. She arrived at Marcus's penthouse every Tuesday and Friday at 7 in the morning, cleaned in silence, and left by noon. She had kind eyes, the kind that seemed to notice things other people missed. Marcus barely looked at her for the first 2 months. She was part of the infrastructure of his life, like the doorman or the dry cleaner, invisible, necessary, forgotten. But Noah noticed her. From the first day, he watched her move through the apartment with a focus Marcus had never seen him give anyone else. And one morning, when Eleanor hummed a song while folding laundry, Noah hummed it back. Marcus was in his home office when he heard it. He stopped mid-email, stood, walked into the hallway, and saw his son, his silent, unreachable son, smiling. It happened slowly at first. Noah began waiting for Elena by the door on the mornings she came. He'd hand her his favorite toy car. She'd roll it back to him. They didn't need words, just presence. Marcus started lingering in the hallway, pretending to check his phone, watching them interact. He noticed how Eleanor never rushed Noah, never forced eye contact. She met him where he was. One Tuesday, Noah had a meltdown. Something about the wrong cup at breakfast. Marcus had tried everything: distraction, bribery, silence. Nothing worked. Then Elena walked in. She didn't speak. She sat down on the floor beside Noah, crossed her legs and waited. 10 minutes later, Noah's breathing slowed. He leaned against her and she let him. Marcus stood there, frozen, watching a stranger do what he couldn't. It didn't make him angry. It made him curious. Who was this woman? And why did his son trust her more than he trusted his own father? That night, Marcus did something he rarely did. He asked Elena to stay after her shift. She looked surprised, maybe worried. But she nodded. They sat in the kitchen, Marcus on one side of the marble island, Eleanor on the other. He offered her tea. She accepted. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Marcus asked her about Noah. How she knew what to do, how she stayed so calm. Eleanor smiled, a sad kind of smile, and told him about her daughter, Lucia. She'd had seizures as a child. The doctors said she might never walk or talk. But Eleanor refused to believe them. She learned everything she could, sat with Lucia for hours, spoke to her even when there was no response, And one day, Lucia spoke back. Marcus listened, really listened, and for the first time in years, he realized he'd been hearing people without listening to them. Eleanor finished her tea and stood to leave, but before she did, she said something that stayed with him. "Your son doesn't need you to fix him, Mr. Holloway. He just needs you to see him." Marcus couldn't sleep that night. He kept replaying Elena's words. See him, it sounded so simple. But Marcus had built his entire career on fixing things, identifying problems, executing solutions, moving on. The idea of just being present, without a goal, without a strategy, felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. He thought about Vanessa, about the fights they'd had in the final year of their marriage. She'd accused him of treating their relationship like a business deal, of optimizing instead of connecting. He'd dismissed it as emotional exaggeration. But now, alone in his king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, he wondered if she'd been trying to tell him the same thing Eleanor just had. That he'd spent so long building walls, he'd forgotten how to build bridges. The next morning, Marcus called his assistant and cleared his schedule. He didn't have meetings, didn't check email. He sat on the floor of Noah's room and watched his son play with blocks. Noah didn't acknowledge him at first, just stacked the blocks, knocked them down, stacked them again. Marcus didn't try to help, didn't offer advice, he just sat. And after 20 minutes, Noah handed him a block. It was small, simple, but it felt like everything. Over the next few weeks, something shifted in Marcus Holloway. He started coming home earlier, eating dinner with Noah instead of in his office. He stopped scheduling calls during Eleanor's shifts, found reasons to be in the same room while she worked, not to supervise, just to observe, to learn. He noticed how she moved through the world with a quiet dignity, how she never complained, even when the work was hard, how she hummed the same songs his own mother used to hum when he was young. One Friday, Marcus asked Eleanor if she'd be willing to stay longer hours. Not as a housekeeper, as a nanny. He offered to triple her pay. She looked at him carefully, as if weighing something he couldn't see, then asked him why. Marcus hesitated. He could have said it was for Noah's benefit. That would have been true. But it wasn't the whole truth. So he told her the real reason. "Because you're teaching me how to be a better father, and I don't want to lose that." Eleanor didn't answer right away. She looked out the window at the city stretching endlessly below them, then back at Marcus. "I'll think about it," she said. She said yes a week later. But she had conditions. She wanted a formal contract, health insurance, paid time off, and 1 day a week to spend with her own daughter. Marcus agreed to everything without hesitation. His lawyer drafted the paperwork. Elena read every word before signing. Marcus respected that. It reminded him of himself 20 years ago, hungry, careful, unwilling to be taken advantage of. Elena moved into the guest room. It wasn't necessary, but Marcus insisted. He wanted her close. For Noah, he told himself. But he knew it was more than that. He wanted to understand her, where she came from, what she valued, what made her so steady in a world that felt increasingly chaotic. They fell into a rhythm. Mornings with Noah. Afternoons where Eleanor managed the household while Marcus worked. Evenings where the three of them ate dinner together. It felt almost normal. Almost like a family. And that scared Marcus more than he cared to admit, because normal wasn't something he knew how to sustain. It was a Thursday in early autumn when Marcus made his first real mistake. He'd just closed a deal, $340 million, his biggest that year, and he was feeling expansive, generous. He came home with gifts, a new tablet for Noah, a designer handbag for Eleanor. She accepted the tablet for Noah but handed the bag back. "I can't take this," she said quietly. Marcus frowned. "Why not? You've earned it." Eleanor shook her head. "Because gifts like that come with expectations, and I don't want to owe you anything beyond what we agreed on." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Embarrassment. Maybe anger. He wasn't used to people refusing him. "It's just a bag, Eleanor. It doesn't mean anything." She looked at him with those kind, knowing eyes. "Then why did you buy it?" He didn't have an answer. She left the bag on the counter and walked away. And Marcus stood there, alone in his spotless kitchen, realizing he'd been trying to buy something that couldn't be bought. her respect, her trust, maybe even her affection. He'd done it his whole life, used money to smooth over discomfort, to create shortcuts to intimacy. And it had always worked. Until now. That night, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the handbag, about what it represented. He'd meant it as a gesture of appreciation. But Eleanor had seen through it. She'd seen what he hadn't wanted to admit, that he was trying to blur the lines between employer and something else, something he didn't have a name for yet. He thought about his ex-wife again, about the jewelry he'd bought her after long business trips, the vacations he'd booked when he missed her birthday. He'd thought those things proved his love. But Vanessa had told him more than once that she didn't want gifts. She wanted his time, his attention, his presence. And he hadn't understood. Not really. Not until Eleanor handed that bag back. The next morning, Marcus apologized. Not with words, he still wasn't good at those, but with action. He asked Elena what she actually wanted, what would make her life easier. She told him the truth. She wanted her daughter Lucia to go to college. But tuition was expensive. And even with 3 jobs, Elena had barely saved enough for the first semester. Marcus didn't hesitate. He set up an education fund. Anonymous, managed through his foundation. Enough to cover 4 years at any school Lucia wanted. He didn't tell Elena right away. He wanted her to discover it on her own, to know it came without strings. Months passed. Winter arrived. Noah started speaking more, not full sentences but words, real words. Mama for Eleanor, Dada for Marcus. Every time Noah spoke, Marcus felt something break open inside him. Some wall he'd built so high, he'd forgotten it was there. One evening, after Noah was asleep, Marcus and Eleanor sat in the living room. She was reading, he was pretending to work. But really, he was just watching her. The way the lamplight caught her profile. The way she smiled at something in her book. And he realized with a clarity that felt almost violent that he was falling in love with her. It terrified him, not because of who she was, but because of who he was. A man who'd failed at love before, who'd chosen ambition over intimacy, who'd built an empire but couldn't build a marriage. What made him think he could do it now? What made him think he deserved her? Eleanor looked up, caught him staring. What? She asked, smiling. Marcus shook his head. Nothing. Just thinking. About what? He almost told her, almost said the words that were burning in his chest. But fear stopped him. Fear of rejection. Fear of changing something that finally felt right. So he lied. Just work. She nodded, went back to her book, and Marcus sat there, hating himself for his cowardice. Christmas came. Marcus's family, his mother, his sister, his 2 nephews, came to visit. They were polite to Elena, polite in that careful, measured way that white families sometimes are when they want to seem progressive but don't quite know how. His mother asked Elena where she was from. His sister complimented her English. Marcus saw the microaggressions, the small condescensions, and for the first time he spoke up. Firmly, clearly. He introduced Elena not as the nanny, but as someone integral to their family. Someone who'd helped save his relationship with his son. His mother raised an eyebrow but said nothing. His sister smiled tightly, and Marcus realized with a sinking feeling that loving Eleanor would mean confronting a world that didn't want them to fit together. That night, after his family left, Eleanor thanked him. For what? Marcus asked. For seeing me, she said. And he understood. It was the same thing she'd asked him to do for Noah. To see, to acknowledge, to honor someone's full humanity, not just the parts that were convenient or comfortable. Marcus took her hand. It was the first time he'd touched her beyond a handshake. Her skin was warm, calloused from years of work. Beautiful. I do see you, he said, more than you know. They kissed that night, slow, tentative, like 2 people who'd been circling each other for months and finally stopped pretending. It wasn't passionate. It was tender, careful, full of questions neither of them had answers to. When they pulled apart, Elena looked at him with something close to sadness. This is going to be complicated, she said. Marcus nodded. I know. People are going to judge us. I know. Your family, your friends, your business partners. I know. She searched his face. And you're willing to risk that? Marcus thought about Noah, about the man he'd been a year ago, isolated, disconnected, half alive. And he thought about the man he was becoming, imperfect, uncertain, but whole. Yes, he said, I am. Elena smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. And for the first time in his life, Marcus Holloway felt like he'd made a decision that money couldn't buy and power couldn't protect. A decision that was just his, just human, just true. But love, as Marcus would soon learn, doesn't exist in a vacuum. By spring, rumors started circulating. His business partners noticed he was leaving the office earlier, declining dinners, spending weekends at home instead of networking. One of his closest colleagues, a man named Richard who'd known Marcus for 15 years, pulled him aside after a board meeting. People are talking, Richard said. Marcus kept his face neutral. About what? About you and the nanny. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Her name is Eleanor. Richard raised his hands in mock. Surrender. I'm not judging. I'm just saying. Be careful. You know how this world works. Optics matter. Marcus wanted to tell Richard to go to hell. But he didn't, because Richard wasn't wrong. Optics did matter. In private equity, perception was currency. And a billionaire dating his housekeeper, no matter how genuine the relationship, would be seen as a scandal, a lapse in judgment, a story for gossip columns and think pieces. Marcus had spent decades building his reputation, and now, for the first time, he had to decide if he was willing to risk it. For love, for Elena, for something real. He told Elena about the conversation that night. She wasn't surprised. I knew this would happen, she said quietly. I knew people would talk. Marcus reached for her hand. Does it bother you? She hesitated. It bothers me that they'll reduce me to a stereotype. The gold digger, the opportunist, the woman who seduced a rich man for his money. Anyone who knows you would know that's not true. But most people don't know me, Marcus. They only know what they assume. She was right. And Marcus hated that she was right. He wanted to protect her from that. From the judgment, the scrutiny, the cruelty of people who'd never bothered to see her as anything more than a role. But he couldn't. The only thing he could do was stand beside her. Publicly, unapologetically. And that terrified him, not because he doubted his feelings, but because he knew what it would cost. His reputation, his business relationships, maybe even his custody arrangement with Vanessa, who'd always been quick to weaponize any perceived instability in his life. But when Marcus looked at Elena, at the woman who'd taught him how to be present, how to be patient, how to be human, he realized the cost of not choosing her would be higher. It would mean returning to the man he used to be, and that man, Marcus now understood, had been slowly dying. Summer arrived. Marcus made his decision. He invited Elena to a gala, a black-tie fundraiser for childhood education that he attended every year. It was the kind of event where New York's elite gathered to write checks and be photographed, where power brokers made deals over champagne and pretended to care about causes they'd forget by morning. Marcus had always hated these events, but he went because it was expected, because it was part of the performance of being Marcus Holloway. This year would be different. This year he'd bring Elena, not as his employee, as his partner. When he asked her, she looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Marcus, I don't belong at something like that. Yes, you do. I don't have anything to wear. I don't know how to talk to those people. Eleanor. He took both her hands. I'm not asking you to perform. I'm asking you to be yourself. That's all I've ever wanted. She studied his face for a long moment. Then quietly, she nodded. Okay. The night of the gala, Marcus stood in the foyer of his penthouse, adjusting his cufflinks, waiting for Elena. When she emerged from her room, he forgot how to breathe. She wore a simple navy dress, nothing flashy, nothing expensive, but she looked radiant, confident, like someone who knew exactly who she was and didn't need anyone's approval. They arrived at the Plaza Hotel just after 8. Cameras flashed. Reporters called out Marcus's name, and when he stepped out of the car and offered his hand to Eleanor, the cameras went wild. He heard the whispers, saw the stares, felt the weight of 100 judgments landing on them like stones. But he didn't let go of her hand. They walked into the ballroom together. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Marcus's colleagues smiled tightly. Their wives exchanged glances, and Marcus realized, with a strange sense of calm, that he didn't care. For the first time in his life, he didn't care what they thought. He cared what Elena thought. He cared what Noah thought. He cared what he thought of himself when he looked in the mirror. And that was enough. The evening was brutal in small, polite ways. People asked Elena where she was from, what she did, how she and Marcus met. Each question felt like a test, a way to confirm or deny their assumptions. Elena handled it with grace. She didn't over-explain, didn't justify. She answered simply, honestly, and moved on. Marcus watched her navigate a world that wasn't built for her, and he felt something close to awe. She was stronger than he'd ever been, braver, more whole. Near the end of the night, an older woman, Margaret Whitfield, a socialite whose husband ran a hedge fund, approached them. She'd had too much wine. Her smile was sharp. "So, Elena," Margaret said, drawing out her name, "how does it feel to go from cleaning Marcus's house to attending galas with him?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Marcus felt rage rising in his chest. But before he could speak, Eleanor smiled. Calm, unbothered. "It feels the same as it did before," she said. "I'm still the same person. The only thing that's changed is who's paying attention." Margaret blinked, faltered, then laughed nervously and walked away. Marcus turned to Eleanor. "I'm sorry. For what?" "For bringing you into this." Eleanor shook her head. "You didn't bring me into anything, Marcus. I chose to come, and I'd choose it again." She meant it. He could see it in her eyes, and in that moment Marcus understood what love actually was. Not the grand gestures, not the gifts or the promises, but the choice to stand beside someone even when the world makes it hard. Especially when the world makes it hard. But the world wasn't finished with them. 3 days after the gala, Marcus received a call from his lawyer. Vanessa was filing for full custody of Noah. Her argument, Marcus's relationship with Eleanor, created an unstable environment for their son. She had photos from the gala, testimonies from concerned parties. A psychologist's opinion, paid for, Marcus was certain, that questioned whether Marcus was prioritizing his son's needs over his own romantic interests. It was a calculated attack, designed to hurt him in the place he was most vulnerable, his relationship with Noah. Marcus sat in his lawyer's office, reading through the filing, feeling something close to despair. He'd worked so hard to become the father Noah needed, and now Vanessa was trying to take that away. Not because she believed he was a bad parent, but because she wanted to punish him for moving on, for finding happiness with someone she didn't approve of. His lawyer, a sharp woman named Catherine, leaned forward. "We can fight this. We have documentation of Noah's progress since Elena came into the picture. Testimonies from his therapists, records of your involvement. But Marcus..." She paused. "This is going to get ugly. Vanessa's team will dig into Elena's past, her immigration status, her work history. They'll try to paint her as someone who's taking advantage of you." Marcus felt sick. "Elena came here legally. She's done everything by the book." "I know. But that won't stop them from trying." Marcus looked out the window at the city below, at the life he'd built, and he realized he had a choice. He could end things with Eleanor, make it easier, protect Noah from the custody battle, go back to the safe, sterile existence he'd known before. Or he could fight. For Eleanor, for Noah, for the family they were becoming. It wasn't even a question. "We fight," Marcus said. The custody battle consumed the next 6 months, depositions, court dates, interviews with social workers who came to the penthouse and observed Marcus with Noah, watched how Eleanor interacted with him, took notes on everything from the food in the fridge to the books on the shelves. It was invasive, humiliating, but Marcus endured it. Eleanor wanted to leave, told Marcus it would be easier if she stepped away, but he refused. "If I let you go to make this easier," he said, "then I'm teaching Noah that love is something you abandon when it gets hard. And I won't do that. I can't," Eleanor cried, the first time Marcus had ever seen her cry, and he held her in the middle of his too big living room and promised her they'd get through it. Together. The breaking point came in court. Vanessa's lawyer called Elena to the stand, asked her about her relationship with Marcus, about her role in Noah's life, about whether she understood the complexity of raising a special needs child. Elena answered every question with quiet dignity. Yes, she loved Marcus. Yes, she loved Noah. No, she wasn't trying to replace his mother. She was just trying to be present, to help, to care. Then Vanessa's lawyer asked the question he'd been building toward. Ms. Rodriguez, before you met Mr. Holloway, you were a housekeeper, is that correct? Yes. And now you live in his penthouse, wear clothes he buys, have access to his money. Some might say that's quite an upgrade. Catherine objected. The judge sustained. But the damage was done. The implication hung in the air that Elena was using Marcus, that she'd seduced a vulnerable man for financial gain. Marcus watched Elena's face, waited for her to crumble. But she didn't. She looked directly at Vanessa's lawyer and spoke with a clarity that cut through the room. I've worked since I was 15 years old. I've cleaned houses, waited tables, cared for children who weren't mine. I've sent money home to my family, paid for my daughter's education, and never asked anyone for anything I didn't earn. So yes, my life looks different now. But not because I took something I didn't deserve. Because I gave something no one else could. I gave Noah my time, my patience, my heart. And if you think that's worth less than money, then you don't understand what value actually means. The courtroom was silent. Vanessa's lawyer had no follow-up, and Marcus, sitting in the gallery, realized he'd just watched the strongest person he'd ever known defend not just herself, but everything they were building together. The judge ruled in Marcus's favor. Joint custody remained in place. Vanessa's motion was denied. The judge noted in her written opinion that Noah had shown significant developmental progress since Eleanor entered his life, and that the relationship between Marcus and Eleanor appeared to be built on mutual respect and genuine care. It was a victory, but it didn't feel like one, because the process had exposed every fear, every insecurity, every doubt that Marcus and Elena had carried in silence. That night, back at the penthouse, they sat on the balcony. Noah was asleep. The city stretched out below them, lights flickering like 1,000 small promises. "Do you regret it?" Marcus asked. Eleanor looked at him. "Regret what?" "This. Us. Everything we've been through." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I regret that the world made us fight for something that should have been simple. But I don't regret you. I don't regret Noah. I don't regret us." Marcus reached for her hand. "I love you," he said. It was the first time he'd said it out loud. Eleanor smiled. "I know. That's it? Just I know?" She laughed. A real laugh, the kind that made her eyes crinkle. "I love you too, Marcus. I've loved you since the day you sat on the floor and just watched Noah play. I've loved you since you stopped trying to fix everything and started trying to understand it. I've loved you since you became the man I always believed you could be." And there, on a balcony overlooking a city that had tried to break them, Marcus Holloway finally understood what it meant to be whole. But understanding wholeness and maintaining it are two different things. The months following the custody battle were some of the hardest of Marcus's life. Not because of external pressure, though that continued, but because of the internal reckoning he could no longer avoid. He'd spent 42 years building an identity around achievement, around being the smartest person in the room, the richest, the most successful. And now, for the first time, none of that mattered. What mattered was whether he could show up for his son, whether he could be present for Eleanor, whether he could learn to value connection over control. It was terrifying. One Tuesday morning, Marcus woke up at 5, as he always did, and reached for his phone to check the markets. Then he stopped, put the phone down, walked to Noah's room instead. His son was still asleep, curled under his dinosaur blanket, one hand clutching a stuffed elephant Eleanor had given him. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed and just watched Noah's chest rise and fall, watched the peace on his face. And he felt something shift inside him, a loosening, a release. He didn't need to be anywhere, didn't need to do anything. He just needed to be here, in this moment, with this child, this life, this grace he didn't deserve, but had somehow been given. Eleanor found him there an hour later. She didn't say anything, just sat beside him. They watched Noah together in silence until he woke up. And when Noah opened his eyes and saw both of them there, he smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. "Morning," he said. It was a small word, simple, but it was everything. Because a year ago, Noah hadn't spoken at all. And now he was greeting the world, greeting them, choosing, in his own way, to be present too. Marcus and Eleanor took Noah to the kitchen, made pancakes together. Noah helped pour the batter, concentrating so hard his tongue stuck out. Eleanor guided his hands. Marcus flipped the pancakes badly, and Noah laughed. It was the most ordinary moment, the kind that happens in kitchens all over the world every single day. But for Marcus, it felt revolutionary, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about what came next. He was just here, just now, just alive. That afternoon, Marcus made a decision. He called Richard and told him he was stepping back from the firm. Not retiring completely, but reducing his role. He'd stay on as an advisor, attend quarterly meetings. But the day-to-day operations, the constant hustle, the endless pursuit of the next deal, he was done with that. Richard was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Are you sure about this?" "Yes. You've worked your entire life to build this company." "I know. And you're just going to walk away?" Marcus looked across the room at Elena, who was reading to Noah on the couch. "I'm not walking away from anything, Richard. I'm walking towards something." Richard didn't understand. Marcus didn't expect him to, because Richard was still the man Marcus used to be, still measuring his worth in quarterly earnings and portfolio valuations, still believing that success meant never stopping, never slowing down, never choosing anything over ambition. Marcus had been that man once, and it had nearly destroyed him. The transition wasn't easy. Marcus had to train his replacement, hand over accounts, let go of control. It went against every instinct he'd developed over 2 decades in business. But every time he felt the urge to micromanage, to step back in, to prove he was still essential, he thought about Noah. About the mornings he'd missed because of early calls, the bedtimes he'd skipped because of late meetings, the years he'd spent building a fortune while his son grew up without him. He couldn't get those years back, but he could choose differently now, and so he did. By autumn, Marcus's new life had taken shape. He worked from home 3 days a week, spent mornings with Noah, had lunch with Eleanor. Afternoons, he focused on a new project, a foundation dedicated to supporting families of children with special needs. It wasn't about the money. Marcus had plenty of that. It was about creating the resources he wished he'd had when Noah was first diagnosed. Support groups, therapy programs, educational materials, respite care for exhausted parents, things that actually helped, things that actually mattered. Elena became his partner in the foundation, not officially at first, but Marcus valued her perspective in ways he'd never valued anyone's before. She understood the struggles these families faced, the isolation, the exhaustion, the constant fear that you're not doing enough, that you're failing the person you love most. She also understood something Marcus was still learning, that vulnerability isn't weakness, that asking for help isn't failure, that community isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Together they built something beautiful, something real, something that would outlast both of them. One evening, after a particularly long day at the foundation, Marcus and Elena sat in his office, their office now, reviewing grant applications. There were hundreds, single mothers who couldn't afford therapy for their autistic children, fathers who'd lost their jobs because they needed flexible schedules, families who were one medical bill away from bankruptcy. Marcus had always known poverty existed, but he'd never really seen it. Not like this. Not in the faces of people who were trying so hard, working so desperately, and still falling behind. Elena read through an application from a woman in Detroit. Single mother, 3 jobs, son with Down syndrome, needed help affording a communication device. Elena's voice cracked as she read. Marcus reached for her hand. "We'll approve it," he said, "all of them." Elena looked at him. "Marcus, we can't approve everyone. The foundation has a budget. Then we'll increase the budget. That's not sustainable. Then I'll make it sustainable." He wasn't being reckless. He was being honest. Because what was the point of having money if he couldn't use it to help people who actually needed it? What was the point of wealth if it didn't translate into dignity for others? Eleanor squeezed his hand. "You're a good man," she said. Marcus shook his head. "I'm trying to be." "That's the same thing." "No," Marcus said, "it's not. A good man would have been doing this all along. I'm just finally catching up." But even as Marcus built this new life, shadows from his old one kept appearing. One morning, he received an email from Vanessa. She wanted to talk about Noah, about custody, about the future. Marcus's first instinct was to ignore it, to have his lawyer handle it. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the tone of the email, less combative, more tired, or maybe it was the fact that he didn't want to spend the rest of his life fighting with the mother of his child. He called Vanessa. They agreed to meet for coffee. Neutral territory, no lawyers, just two people who'd once loved each other, trying to figure out how to co-parent a child they both adored. They met at a small cafe in Brooklyn, far from the places they used to go together. Vanessa arrived first. She looked different. Softer maybe, or just older. She'd cut her hair, lost weight. There were lines around her eyes that Marcus didn't remember. "Thanks for coming," she said. Marcus sat down. Of course. For a moment they just looked at each other, all the history between them, the good years, the bad ones, the divorce, the custody battle, hanging in the air like smoke. Then Vanessa spoke. "I'm sorry," she said. Marcus blinked. "For what?" "For the custody thing, for making it ugly, for using Noah as a weapon." She looked down at her coffee. "I was angry. At you, at myself, at the fact that you'd moved on and I hadn't. And I took it out on you in the worst possible way." Marcus didn't know what to say. He'd expected defensiveness, justifications, not this. "Elena's good for Noah," Vanessa continued. "I can see that. And she's good for you. You're different now, better." "I'm trying." "I know." Vanessa smiled, a sad kind of smile. "That's more than you used to do." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Forgiveness, maybe, or just understanding. "We both made mistakes," he said. "But Noah's doing well. That's what matters." Vanessa nodded. "I want us to be able to co-parent, really co-parent. Not just exchange him at doorsteps and communicate through lawyers. I want us to be adults about this." "I want that too." They talked for another hour, about Noah's progress, his therapy, his school. They talked about schedules and holidays and how to handle Noah's birthday. And for the first time since the divorce, it felt like a collaboration instead of a negotiation. When they left the cafe, Vanessa hugged him. "Take care of yourself, Marcus," she said. "You too." And just like that, another piece of his old life found resolution. Meanwhile, Eleanor's daughter, Lucia, graduated from college. The ceremony was in May at a state school upstate. Elena had been nervous about it for weeks. Not because she wasn't proud, she was bursting with pride, but because she'd never been to a college graduation before. Didn't know what to wear, didn't know if she'd fit in. Marcus insisted they all go, him, Elena, and Noah. They drove up the morning of the ceremony, the four of them crammed into Marcus's Range Rover, singing along to the radio. Noah kept asking questions about college, what it was, why people went, whether he could go someday. Elena answered every question with patience and hope. "You can do anything you want, mi amor," she said, "anything." The graduation was beautiful. Hundreds of students in caps and gowns, families cheering, cameras flashing. When Lucia's name was called, Eleanor stood and screamed. Actually screamed. Marcus had never seen her so unguarded, so joyful, and when Lucia walked across that stage and accepted her diploma, Marcus felt tears in his eyes. Because this wasn't just Lucia's achievement, it was Elena's. Every double shift she'd worked, every sacrifice she'd made, every dream she'd deferred. It had led to this, to her daughter standing on that stage, holding proof that a different life was possible. After the ceremony, they took Lucia to dinner, a nice restaurant. The kind Elena would never have taken her daughter to on her own. Lucia was radiant, confident. She talked about her plans, graduate school, a job in social work, a desire to help families like her own. Marcus listened, amazed. This young woman, who'd grown up with so little, had become someone who wanted to give back. Someone who understood that privilege wasn't just about what you had, but what you did with it. At one point, Lucia turned to Marcus. "Thank you," she said, "for the scholarship fund. My mum told me you set it up." Marcus glanced at Elena. She shrugged, smiling. "I had to tell her eventually." "You didn't have to do that," Lucia continued, "but it changed my life, and I won't forget it." Marcus felt uncomfortable with the gratitude. He always did. "You earned it," he said. "I just removed a barrier." "Still," Lucia said, "thank you." And Marcus understood, maybe for the first time, what it meant to use wealth well. Not to control, not to impress, but to open doors. To make possible what should have always been possible. To honor people's potential instead of exploiting their desperation. That summer, Marcus proposed, not with a grand gesture, not at a restaurant or a vacation. He proposed on a Tuesday morning, in the kitchen, while Eleanor was making breakfast and Noah was building a tower out of cereal boxes. He got down on one knee, held out a ring, simple, elegant, exactly her style, and asked her to marry him. Eleanor stared at him. "Are you serious?" "Yes." "Marcus, we've been through so much. The custody battle, the scrutiny, your family, my family. All of it. Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." She looked at the ring, at Noah, who'd stopped building to watch, at Marcus, still kneeling on the kitchen floor. Then she started crying, and laughing, and nodding. "Yes," she said, "yes, I'll marry you." Noah cheered, actually cheered, and in that moment, in that ordinary kitchen on that ordinary Tuesday, Marcus felt something he'd been chasing his entire life. Completeness. They got married in September, a small ceremony. Just family and close friends. Marcus's mother came, his sister came. They were kind to Elena, genuinely kind. Because they'd seen what Marcus had seen, that she made him better, that she made Noah happier, that love, real love, wasn't about status or background. It was about showing up, every day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Eleanor's family came from the Dominican Republic. Her mother, her two brothers, her nieces and nephews. They filled the penthouse with music and laughter and food that made Marcus's sterile kitchen feel alive for the first time. Elena's mother, Rosa, took Marcus's hands in hers. She didn't speak much English, but she didn't need to. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much hardship and too little kindness, and she said in halting English, "You love my daughter?" "Yes," Marcus said, "more than anything." "You take care of her?" "I will. I promise." Rosa nodded, then she pulled him into a hug. A real hug. The kind that crushed your ribs and made you feel safe at the same time. And Marcus, who'd grown up in a family where affection was scarce and emotions were controlled, felt something break open inside him. Acceptance, belonging, family. The ceremony itself was simple. No religious officiant, neither of them was particularly religious, but a friend who'd gotten ordained online just for the occasion. They wrote their own vows. Elena went first. She talked about seeing Marcus for the first time as a man who had everything except what he needed. She talked about watching him learn to be present, to be vulnerable, to be human. She talked about Noah and the family they were building, and the life they were choosing together. Her voice didn't waver. She spoke with the same quiet strength she brought to everything. Then it was Marcus's turn. He'd written his vows a dozen times, torn them up, started over. Nothing felt adequate. How do you put into words what someone has given you when what they've given you is yourself? But standing there, looking at Elena in her simple white dress, he stopped trying to be eloquent. He just told the truth. "I was lost," he said. "I didn't know it. I thought I was successful. I thought I was happy. But I was lost, and you found me. Not by trying to fix me, not by telling me what to do, but by showing me what it looks like to be whole, to be present, to be enough, exactly as you are. You taught me how to love my son, how to love you, how to love myself, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift." Elena was crying, so was Rosa. So was Marcus's mother, so was Noah, though he probably didn't fully understand why. And when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Marcus did. Soft, tender, full of promise. The reception was loud and joyful. Eleanor's family danced. Marcus's family watched at first, then joined in. His sister, who'd been skeptical of Elena from the beginning, found herself salsa dancing with one of Elena's brothers. His mother sat with Rosa, the two of them communicating in gestures and smiles and the universal language of mothers who love their children. Noah danced with everyone. He spun Elena around until they were both dizzy. He let Marcus lift him up and twirl him through the air. He laughed so hard he got the hiccups. And Marcus, watching his son, their son, be so freely, joyfully himself, realized that this was what he'd been building toward his whole life. Not wealth, not success, but this moment, this family, this love. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had left, Marcus and Eleanor stood on the balcony. The city stretched out below them, endless and indifferent. But up here, in this moment, they were everything. "Are you happy?" Marcus asked. Eleanor leaned against him. "Yes?" "Are you?" "Yes." They stood there in silence for a while, then Eleanor said, "Do you ever think about who we were when we met?" "All the time. Do you miss him? That version of you?" Marcus thought about it, about the man who'd measured his worth in millions, who'd kept everyone at arm's length, who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten there was a world beyond them. "No," he said, "I don't miss him at all." Eleanor smiled. "Good, because I love who you are now." "Who am I now?" "You're a father, a husband, a man who shows up, who tries, who fails sometimes but keeps trying anyway. You're human, and that's enough." Marcus kissed the top of her head. "It's enough," he repeated, and for the first time in his life he believed it. The years that followed were not without challenges. Noah had setbacks, days where he couldn't speak, days where the world felt too loud or too bright or too much, days where Marcus and Eleanor didn't know what to do except be there. But they got through them, together. Marcus's business continued to thrive, though he was less involved. He'd handed over most operations to younger partners who still believed in growth for growth's sake. He didn't judge them. He just didn't envy them either. Eleanor continued working at the foundation. It became her passion, her purpose. She connected with families in ways Marcus never could, because she'd lived it. She knew what it felt like to be alone, to be afraid, to wonder if you were enough, and she used that knowledge to build programs that actually helped. That actually mattered. Lucia became a social worker as she'd planned. She worked with immigrant families, helping them navigate systems that weren't designed for them. She was good at it. Patient, fierce, just like her mother, and every time Marcus saw her, he felt grateful. Not because he'd helped pay for her education, but because she was proof that the world could change, that barriers could be broken, that one generation's struggles didn't have to define the next. Marcus's relationship with his own family improved, too. His mother, who'd been distant during the early years with Eleanor, became one of her strongest supporters. She'd come over for Sunday dinners, bring toys for Noah, sit with Eleanor in the kitchen, and talk about recipes and motherhood and life. One evening, after Noah had gone to bed, Marcus found his mother and Elena laughing together over a bottle of wine. He stood in the doorway, watching, and felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Peace. His mother noticed him. "What are you smiling about?" she asked. "Just this," Marcus said, "all of this." His mother's expression softened. "You did good, Marcus. I know I didn't always make it easy. But you did good." It was the closest she'd ever come to apologizing. And it was enough. Marcus's sister, Jennifer, also came around. She and her husband had been going through problems, the kind Marcus recognized from his own first marriage. Work stress, emotional distance, the slow erosion of intimacy. One night, Jennifer called Marcus, asked if they could talk. They met for lunch. Jennifer looked exhausted. "How do you do it?" she asked. "Do what?" "Stay connected, stay present. You and Elena, you make it look easy." Marcus laughed. "It's not easy. We work at it, every day." "But how? I love David, I do. But I don't know how to reach him anymore. And I'm tired of trying." Marcus thought about Vanessa, about all the ways he'd failed her, about all the chances he'd missed. "You have to decide it matters more than your pride," he said, "more than your ego, more than being right. You have to show up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you don't know what to say, especially then. Jennifer was quiet. Then she said, "Do you think it's too late for us?" "I don't know, but I know it was almost too late for me. And if Elena hadn't been patient enough to wait while I figured it out, I'd still be alone. So maybe start there, be patient. With him, with yourself, and see what happens." Jennifer nodded. "Thank you. Anytime." 6 months later, Jennifer told Marcus she and David were doing better. Not perfect, but better. They were in therapy, talking more, trying, and Marcus was proud of her, because trying is all any of us can do. Noah grew older. By the time he was 12, he was speaking in full sentences, reading at grade level, making friends at his specialized school. He still had autism. That didn't go away. But he learned to navigate the world in his own way, and Marcus and Elena learned to support him without trying to change him. One evening, Noah asked Marcus a question. "Dad, why did you and Mom get divorced?" Marcus had been dreading this question for years, but now it didn't scare him. Because sometimes people love each other, but they're not good for each other. Your mom and I wanted different things, and that's okay. Do you love Elena? Yes. Does she love you? Yes. Noah thought about this. Then he said, "Good. Because she makes you smile more." Marcus looked at his son. At this, beautiful, perceptive person who saw the world so clearly. "She does," Marcus said. "She really does." Noah smiled. "She makes me smile more too." And Marcus felt his heart break open, because this was everything, this moment, this conversation, this child who felt safe enough to speak his truth. This was what he'd been working toward. This was what mattered. By the time Noah turned 15, he'd started talking about the future, about what he wanted to do, what he wanted to be. He loved animals, especially dogs. He wanted to work with them somehow, train them maybe, or help other kids with special needs connect with therapy animals. Marcus and Elena encouraged him, looked into programs, visited facilities, and Marcus marveled at how different this was from his own childhood. His father had told him exactly what to do, what to study, what career to pursue. There'd been no room for dreams, only expectations. But Marcus wasn't his father, and he wasn't going to make the same mistakes. One Saturday, Marcus and Noah went to a therapy dog training facility. Noah's eyes lit up the moment they walked in. He interacted with every dog, learned their names, their personalities, their stories. The trainer, a woman named Sarah, pulled Marcus aside. "Your son is special," she said. "I know." "No, I mean, he has a gift. The dogs respond to him in ways I rarely see. He's patient, present, calm. Those are the most important qualities in this work." Marcus felt pride swell in his chest. "He learned that from his mother," he said. "Then she's a good teacher. The best." When they left the facility, Noah was quiet, but it was a good quiet. A thinking quiet. Finally, he said, "Dad, I think I know what I want to do." "Yeah?" "I want to help kids like me, with dogs. I think dogs understand us better than most people do." Marcus's throat tightened. "I think you're right. Do you think I can do it?" "I know you can." Noah smiled, and Marcus realized that this, watching his son discover his purpose, his passion, his path, was the greatest success he'd ever achieve. Not the companies he'd bought, not the fortune he'd built, but this boy, this moment, this future unfolding. As Marcus approached 50, he started reflecting more on his life, on the choices he'd made, the person he'd been, the person he'd become. He thought about the night he'd stood in Noah's doorway and watched Elena comfort his son, how something in him had stirred, how he'd been too afraid to name it at first. But it had been love. Simple, terrifying, transformative love. He thought about all the years he'd wasted chasing things that didn't matter, recognition, status, more money than he could ever spend, and how close he'd come to losing everything that actually did matter. His relationship with his son, his capacity for intimacy, his humanity. One morning, Marcus woke up before dawn. couldn't sleep, so he got up and made coffee and sat on the balcony watching the city wake up. Elena found him there. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just thinking." She sat beside him. "About what?" "About how different my life could have been. If you hadn't walked in that day, if Noah hadn't responded to you, if I hadn't been paying attention." Eleanor took his hand. "But you were paying attention. That's what changed everything." "Was I? Or did you just make it impossible not to see?" Eleanor smiled. "Maybe both." They sat there as the sun rose, as the city turned from grey to gold, as a new day began. And Marcus felt grateful, not for his wealth, not for his success, but for this, for her, for the life they'd built together, for the man he'd become because of her. That afternoon, Marcus did something he hadn't done in years. He called his father. They hadn't spoken much since the divorce. His father had disapproved, not of the divorce itself, but of the way Marcus had handled it. The emotions, the messiness, the failure to keep it all private and professional. But Marcus didn't care about his father's approval anymore. He just wanted to talk. His father answered on the third ring. "Marcus, Dad, how are you?" "Fine, busy. You?" "Good. Really good, actually." There was a pause. Then his father said, "I heard you got remarried." "I did, 2 years ago." To the help. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, and it was meant to wound, but Marcus didn't take the bait. "Her name is Elena, and yes, she used to work for me, but now she's my wife and my partner, and the best thing that ever happened to me." His father was quiet. Then he said, "Are you happy?" The question surprised Marcus. His father had never asked him that before. "Yes," Marcus said. "I am." "Good." It was a small word, but it carried weight. Acceptance, maybe, or just acknowledgement. Either way, it was enough. They talked for a few more minutes, about Noah, about the foundation, about Marcus's work. And when they hung up, Marcus felt something shift. Not forgiveness, exactly, but release. He didn't need his father's approval, didn't need his pride, didn't need anything from him except this. The space to be himself. And now he had it. The foundation continued to grow. By Marcus's 50th birthday, they'd helped over 5,000 families, provided therapy for kids who couldn't afford it, scholarships for siblings who'd been overlooked, respite care for parents on the edge of burnout, support groups, legal aid, resources, hope. It wasn't flashy work, didn't make headlines, but it changed lives. One family at a time, one child at a time. Eleanor insisted they celebrate Marcus's birthday, not with a big party, just the people who mattered. Family, close friends, the team from the foundation. They gathered at the penthouse, music played, food was shared, stories were told, and Marcus, standing in the middle of it all, felt overwhelmed, not by the noise or the people, but by the love, by the fact that this was his life now, that these were his people, that he belonged here. Noah gave a toast. He was 17 now, tall, confident, still autistic, but thriving. "My dad taught me that it's okay to be different," Noah said. "That being different isn't something to fix. It's just who you are. And that's enough." People applauded. Marcus cried. Eleanor held his hand. And for the rest of the evening, Marcus just soaked it in. All of it. The laughter, the warmth, the messy, beautiful reality of a life well lived. Late that night, after everyone had left, Marcus and Eleanor sat on the couch, exhausted, happy. 50, Eleanor said. "How does it feel?" Marcus thought about it. "It feels like I'm just getting started." "On what?" "On the part that matters. The first half was about building. This half is about being." Eleanor smiled. "I like that." "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence. Then Marcus said, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met?" "Sometimes." And? "And I think we both would have been fine. We're both strong, but we wouldn't have been whole. Not like this." Marcus nodded. She was right. He would have survived, would have continued making money, making deals, making a life that looked successful from the outside, but he would have been hollow, empty, lost. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For seeing me." when no one else did, when I didn't even see myself. Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for letting me." And there, in the quiet of their home, with the city humming below and their son asleep down the hall, Marcus Holloway understood the truth. Wealth isn't measured in dollars. Success isn't measured in deals. A life isn't measured in achievements. It's measured in moments like this. In the people who choose you, in the love you give and receive, in the courage to change, in the willingness to be seen, in the decision made every single day to show up, to try, to be present, to be enough. Marcus had spent 42 years chasing the wrong things, but he'd spent the last 8 chasing the right ones. And that made all the difference. If you lost everything, what part of you would remain? Marcus used to fear that question, because he didn't know the answer. But now he did. The part that would remain was the part Elena had helped him find, the part that loved his son, the part that showed up, the part that tried, the part that was human. And that part, Marcus had learned, was more than enough. It was everything. Years later, Marcus would look back on his life and see it clearly. The first chapter, ambition without purpose. The second, purpose discovered through love. And the third, the one he was still writing, love deepened through commitment. He thought about the night he'd stood in Noah's doorway, about the maid comforting his son, about the way his heart had stirred. He hadn't known then that he was watching his future unfold, hadn't known that the woman kneeling on his son's bedroom floor would become his wife, his partner, his home. But some part of him had known, some deep, buried part, that had been waiting to be found. And Elena had found it. Not by trying, just by being herself, by being present, by showing him what wholeness looked like. Marcus once thought wealth was freedom. Now he knew it was another kind of cage. Unless you used it right, unless you let it serve love instead of ego, unless you remembered that money could open doors but couldn't build bridges. Only people could do that. Only presence, only patience, only care. And so Marcus chose to be present, chose to be patient, chose to care, not because it was easy, but because it was true, because it was the only thing worth choosing. The world would judge him. Some would say he'd lost his edge, gone soft, wasted his potential. But Marcus didn't care about the world's opinion anymore. He cared about his son's laughter, his wife's smile, the families his foundation helped, the life he was building one small, intentional choice at a time. That was his legacy. Not the companies he'd acquired, not the fortune he'd accumulated, but the love he'd learned to give, the presence he'd learned to offer, the man he'd learned to be. And that he knew was worth more than any amount of money could ever buy. So if this story made you reflect, let us know in the comments. What do you think true wealth really is? Because Marcus Holloway spent half his life learning the answer, and it was simpler than he ever imagined. It was right there, in the doorway, watching a woman comfort his son, waiting for him to see it, waiting for him to choose it. And when he finally did, everything changed. Not overnight, not dramatically, but slowly, steadily, truly, and that made all the difference. That